So Sony has just announced the PlayStation Pro, and I'm writing this hot off the heels of the announcement as well as the latest state of play, and I just wanted to get some heated gamer words onto a page and read them out loud because I just needed to. This whole announcement, this $700 console, and the lackluster amount of work that has gone into marketing the product is just, I'm so dumbfounded by this. It's a console that will be launching at an MSRP of $700 with no disc tray, 2 terabytes of data, or also known as enough space to download exactly one Call of Duty game, and one pack-in game, which is the same pack-in game that the PS5 launched with 4 years ago. And there will only be a handful of games released for the console that will support these updated specs right out of the gate. Everything about the announcement just screams tone deaf to me by Sony. And I'm happy to say that I'm not alone in this assessment, as the response to the PS5 Pro has been pretty whelming. I think it's fair to say that very few people think that the PS5 Pro is a good idea. While it does offer better performance over the PS5 in almost every way, many people do not think that the $700 price tag justifies the benefits. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how ill-defined the benefits of the Pro version are. Sony has shown 3 major things that define what makes the PS5 Pro so special, and those things are PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, which is just a fancy way of saying you get more pixel per pixel when playing in 4K, better performance so games can reach frame rates of 120, and upgraded ray tracing. Wow, these are kinda nothing burger upgrades, aren't they? So all of this got me thinking about the current state of the console market. The console wars are over because the market as it stands today is stagnant. Sales are declining because the price of said consoles has stayed the same since launch, and hell, the digital-only version of the PS5 actually got more expensive than when it launched in 2020. When it launched, it only cost $400, but now it's sitting at $450. Never in my life have I seen a console go up in price after it's been on the market for so long. Things aren't looking good for either Sony or Microsoft right now in terms of consoles or even game development, as neither company has really made a push to even make any games for their damn consoles. Shown here are all of the current PS5 games you can only play on the console, but even then, the majority of them are only timed exclusives as they often make their way to PC. Some require the additional PSVR headset, and others aren't even out yet. It's a sad state of affairs for Sony and Microsoft because they have these incredibly expensive consoles and yet nothing to play on them.
Where the video games?
And when games do come out for these consoles, they end up being live service pieces of garbage that do nothing but die after 2 weeks. Looking at you, Concord, you lovable mess of a game, you. So with all this in mind, I want to ask a question. Why the hell would anyone buy a console in today's world? What is the purpose of buying either an Xbox, a PS5, or any other console for that matter, when it feels like it's just giving diminishing returns? When consoles can go as high as $700, wouldn't it just be a much better investment overall to just buy a PC instead? Those are the questions I want to ask today. Why buy a console in today's market when you could buy a PC instead? But before I go any further, it would help immensely if you would like and subscribe down below if you want to see more videos like this, and it also helps spread the conversation to more and more people. Now let's dive in. The best way to get to the bottom of the conundrum of today's topic is to understand why people buy consoles in the first place. Consoles have been a staple in the gaming industry since their inception, as it was deemed the only way to play arcade-style games at home, and so it became the standard. They were seen as a pretty luxury item to have because they required both a TV and a game cartridge. But as time progressed, it became a much more affordable pastime as TVs became more widespread and consoles became cheaper to produce and acquire. I'd say that they really came into their own during the 6th generation of consoles with the release of the PS2 and original Xbox, as not only were they game consoles, but they also functioned as cheap and affordable DVD players, and this factor cannot be discounted. When DVD players first hit the market in 1997, they could vary in price from $300 to $1,000. So if you told someone you could also play DVDs and games on a PS2 for $300, it was never really a question about which was more valuable, was it? So these consoles weren't just valuable for gaming, but also as entertainment devices for the whole home. That's what gave them a lot of value around that time. And with every new console generation, generation brought something new to the table in terms of graphical power and gaming experiences. Another thing that made them so valuable was because they were always so easy to use. It was as simple as buying the box, unpacking it, plugging in the console, and just playing. There were no settings to fiddle with, no patches, you just played the games as they came. Backwards compatibility also offered the ability to play last generation's games in an easy way, which was a way for the consumer to carry forward the money they invested into the games of the last generation into the next one. But support for backwards compatibility was pretty inconsistent for all manufacturers, especially for Nintendo, which were always kind of in their own lane to begin with. But that also plays into the cons of owning a console. As we've progressed further into the console generations and being connected to the internet basically became a requirement, the positives of owning a console have started to stifle and more negatives arise in their place. With the current generation of consoles, we're starting to see an increasing amount of diminishing returns when purchasing one. It's no longer as easy as it used to be when buying a system and just putting in a game straight out of the box. Very rarely does a game come out today that just works, something that you can just play from start to finish and has a satisfying beginning, middle, and end without having to have it updated and patched. You know, just a video game-ass video game. Which, speaking of, plays into how few first-party games are being released from Sony and Microsoft these days. All of their studios release about one game on average per console generation because games cost so damn much to make these days. And when you're spending $500 for a console, you're gonna want the best games money can buy. Games that push the boundaries of the medium and do new and interesting things with gameplay, graphics, presentation, and sound. And with that increased level of production comes with it the increase in game price. The cost of AAA game development is not what it once was, so game prices have to rise to compete with it. And people aren't happy if they buy a game that runs them $70 and it ends up being dog shit in more ways than one. Expectations for games is higher than ever, so that $70 needs to go to some goddamn good graphics and gameplay, or else people will rightfully be upset. But with good graphics comes, of course, performance woes. It's a tale as old as time, really. This has been a pretty consistent theme through every console generation, with games fluctuating in performance as developers constantly push these tiny little boxes of hopes and dreams into producing mind-bending graphics. I'd say that developers have gotten much better at reining in performance through optimization of games as time has progressed, and even today, I think it's probably the best it's ever been. But that doesn't stop console makers from making multiple versions of the same console that offer varying levels of performance for different price points. This is a fairly new trend that has been adopted by both Microsoft and Sony, and in theory, I don't think it's a bad idea. Consoles have gotten expensive, and it gives people who have less expendable income more access to today's newer gaming experiences. But it also means that these less powerful consoles often get the short end of the stick when it comes to game development. Developers no longer see these models as the baseline for development and will instead develop for the more powerful consoles and work downward from there, cutting features like split-screen multiplayer, for example. They play worse than their more expensive counterparts, lacking the frame rates necessary to compete, but sometimes that's all people have access to and can afford. But let's also look at it from the perspective of someone who wants the best of the best that a console has to offer. They have a massive amount of expendable income at their disposal, and they want the best console on the market. They buy these uber expensive console variants that offer incredible graphics and performance, but it's never guaranteed. Game developers can never ensure that the games they make can hit those frame rates that the console manufacturers said that they could, so they just spent all of this money on the idea that games might perform better on the most expensive version. It feels like a scam. Why would I spend all of this money to play games that might run better? And even if they do run better, the changes on screen are minimal at best. The average consumer cannot tell when ray tracing is on or not, or if those frames go above 60, or even 30 for that matter. So it makes the choice between a base model and the premium model difficult to make. Now, choices aren't inherently a bad thing, but the way they're being handled this console generation isn't fantastic from any metric. You have to think of the people buying these consoles in the first place. These are parents, children, grandparents, and people that are often so tech illiterate that they do not know the difference between all of the model variants on offer. Like, ask the average person what the difference between an Xbox Series S and an Xbox Series X are, and I can guarantee you that they won't know. People don't want to make decisions when buying a console. They just want to play what they want to play. They just want to buy a box, plug it in, and go. But that's not the case anymore, as players have to choose between the model they want and then performance and fidelity modes. The average gamer doesn't care for these things because all they do is play Call of Duty or Madden. It's not simple anymore, and when consoles get pricier, it just makes the decision-making process more stressful from a consumer perspective. And the frustration just gets worse from there. With the advent of multiplayer and live service models becoming more prevalent, that meant that server infrastructure became more expensive to maintain for both Microsoft and Sony, so they had to begin charging users the privilege to play online. So not only did they have to pay a monthly subscription to Xbox Live or PlayStation Plus, but they also have to pay for their own current internet subscription on top of it just to play Call of Duty. But these expensive subscription services also come with some benefits to ease the cost, like free games or even services like Xbox Game Pass, which allow a subscriber access to free games just by subscribing. Xbox Game Pass has changed substantially since it was introduced in 2017, especially this year. It used to be a really amazing offer of paying a $10 sub to play the newest games Microsoft published, as well as a great collection of indie titles. But in 2024, they've recently changed it so you can't play new games released by Microsoft studios like Blizzard or Activision day one, and they raised the price to $15. So not only does it give you less, but it also costs more. So if you wanted what you previously had with those day one first party releases, you're going to be expected to fork over $20 a month just to play Call of Duty when it comes out. Another thing I think is important to mention is that first party exclusives don't really have the weight they once had, as companies like Microsoft and Sony keep buying up these studios to ensure that they have a great catalog of IPs. They don't do anything with these IPs. These studios don't make games as frequently as they used to, so the value of console exclusives has shot way down as a result. And not to mention that the quality of these exclusives has also been incredibly suspect. If we look back last year, Redfall, it was one of Microsoft's biggest failures to date, and their track record with first-party releases hasn't been great since then. They've either been flops or meh at best. Even Halo has been in a bit of a sour spot since 343 took over and has been struggling for a while, but has made a bit of a comeback as of late. Sony, on the other hand, has an incredibly strong catalog of premium single-player games, but they rarely release these games as their developers take way too long to make them. And when Sony tries to go outside of their comfort zone with games like Concord, the results speak for themselves. AAA first-party games by Sony and Microsoft haven't been consistently good in a long time. And even when a first-party exclusive does hit either console, their time on that console is limited, as everything makes its way to PC now. Microsoft has made it a business strategy that all of their first-party games release on PC day one, and Sony has also made it so that their single-player games make it to PC eventually, like God of War Ragnarok being the most recent example. So let's get this straight. Consoles are more expensive than they've ever been. Games are getting more expensive. Game quality is becoming much more scrutinized because of this increased cost. You're forced to pay to play online the games that you purchased. Exclusives aren't exclusives, and choosing a console isn't as simple as it once was. So looking at this list, it kind of sounds like we're just paying a lot more for a lot less, and things are just worse than they used to be. To me, these sound like nothing but negatives. So this kind of leads me to ask, why buy a console instead of a PC? If games are what you want and you're seeking the best performance on the market, then the PC is right there. Not only do they offer unprecedented flexibility so that the user can cater their experience however they want, but it also offers console experiences for the same price or often cheaper than what they can get on console as long as they are patient. Now, for some context, I grew up a console gamer. I grew up playing on a GameCube and PS2 in the early 2000s, and once the HD generation came out, I slowly transitioned away from consoles as I became more independent. I came to the conclusion conclusion on my own that PC gaming offered much more variety in gameplay experiences and even had the potential for emulating the games I grew up playing. I would still buy the occasional consoles, but I simply did not engage with the latest generation because I just didn't think it was worth it. There were only a handful of games on them that I couldn't play, but all of them made it to PC eventually, so I just didn't bother with them. The industry has hit a plateau when it comes to console gaming. It used to be that with every new console generation, a major jump in both fidelity and presentation would follow. These new generations would bring forth many new forms of games that just weren't possible on previous generations, with much more bombast than what was previously possible. But with the latest generation of consoles, it felt like a tipping point. AAA publishers are now locked into this rat race to see who can push out marginally better looking graphics than everyone else on the market. Everything needs to be bigger. Everything needs to be better looking. It needs to be presentable. And they are doing all this while making the most bland, cookie cutter, mass market experiences possible in order to turn a profit instead of making something fun to play. Games are more expensive to make now than they've ever been, so the industry is finding ways to monetize what already exists without taking the risk on anything new and exciting. And I think it's the wrong way to go about it. Instead of delivering groundbreaking fidelity and samey padded out gameplay to maintain the AAA facade, developers should focus more on pushing out games with similar fidelity that offer new and unique gameplay experiences that haven't been experienced before. Hell, I'm more inclined to play shorter, worse looking games if it means they can offer brand new experiences. We can take a look at Nintendo and what they did with Tears of the Kingdom, for instance. Tears of the Kingdom looks identical in graphical fidelity and presentation to Breath of the Wild, but it changes up existing gameplay models and plays with them in new and exciting ways to give the players something they've never played before. Nintendo is really good about this, honestly. If Sony and Microsoft are in a head-to-head race, Nintendo is off in the park having a stroll. It's not even a race. They're just in their own lane doing what they do, which is make fun and unique games using existing IPs that are well established, and they are never afraid to try something new with them. Unless it's Pokemon, and then they just recycle the same slop every year and sue any potential copyright infringement. You know, normal stuff. But Nintendo also doesn't let games pass through their walled garden. First-party Nintendo titles never make it outside of their consoles, and they are almost never re-released, so players often take to emulation or having to re-buy the older games when Nintendo deems they are worthy of a re-release. But that's a topic for a different video altogether. Sony and Microsoft don't seem so keen as to let their games stick to one console anymore because it is proven to not be profitable. Console exclusives used to be a tool to encourage people to buy your console over the other, but that's just not really the case anymore. Console exclusives aren't really exclusive anymore, and it's for a couple of reasons. Reason number one being that these games are getting way too expensive to make, as mentioned earlier, and the best way to recuperate costs is to sell to as many people as possible, even if it means selling it on a competitor's console. Reason number two being that the consoles being their own self-contained ecosystems isn't really a thing anymore. With the advent of games like Fortnite pioneering the crossplay between consoles and PCs, anyone can play with everyone now. So when it doesn't matter what console you're playing on anymore, why should it matter what console you buy a game on? The more I talk about consoles and think about what they offer in today's market, I can't help but feel like my decision to deep dive into PC gaming instead was the best choice I've made in a long time. Now, don't get me wrong, I love PC gaming, but I also realize that it's not for everyone. It can be a costly hobby if you don't know what to expect, but I think the value proposition is much more than that of a console. I think if you're looking to be gaming in the long term, a PC is just overall the better value proposition any way you squeeze it. Not only can you play recent releases from both Sony and Microsoft, but you can play them in comparable and if not better quality than what they initially released in. Right now, I'm playing through Final Fantasy 16 for the first time after its 1 year of exclusivity right now on PS5, and I'm getting it to play in 4K, 100 frames per second, which is not something I think even a PS5 Pro could push out once it's released. Same thing I did with Ghost of Tsushima and Ratchet & Clank, both of which hit PC earlier this year, and I've had a blast with both of those titles. All of these games run brilliantly, and I'll be able to play anything Sony or Microsoft throw out in the future for a good long while without any hiccups just because of the brute force I have under the hood. This performance, however, did come at a pretty substantial cost. The machine that I put together with a 4080 costs about about $1,700 to put together, which is 2 PS5 Pros put together with some change. That's not to mention that I put together the PC myself, and not everyone is willing to do that. So if you were looking to get a decent pre-built with similar specs, the assembly costs can vary. These things can get really expensive, like $2,000 expensive for a brand new kitted out PC with all the bells and whistles. I was also able to save a few $100 because I had some pieces left over from my last build that I was able to swap out. Swapping out pieces shouldn't be considered the norm though. PCs are complicated things that are never consistent between people, so everyone will have different experiences with each one they handle. You could be running an AMD rig that doesn't have the more refined drivers that Nvidia does, or maybe you're running a laptop from 2011. I see you. To me, the price is well worth what I can do with a PC. I spend every day at it, either gaming or editing or writing, so it's kind of my multi-tool for life. It's an excellent place to be for work and play, so it's well worth it for me to put a lot of money into it. But some people don't want that kind of complexity in their life. It's easier to buy a box that goes under your TV and not have to think about making sure your PC is running well, performing diagnostics to get optimal performance, or even changing out parts to future-proof it for bigger games that might come down the road. And let's be honest, the PC gaming community is a bit of a cult, honestly. They will never pass up an opportunity to let you know how much it costs to make their custom shitbox 4000 with dual toilet flush cooling systems and 64 gigafarts, and how it could easily outdo the PS5 or Xbone any day. They always want someone to know. And I think it's well-intentioned, honestly. Good beefy PCs not only offer the ability to play today's releases, but also everything from the inception of PC gaming. The backlog is astounding, and backwards compatibility isn't an issue for older games as long as you have the grit and determination needed to dig through a forum archive to learn how to boot up a game released back in 2005 with no widescreen support. But even then, we have the wonderful people over at GOG who have made getting into classic PC gaming much simpler as they reformat these literal good old games into ways modern operating systems can handle. Nothing is off limits when it comes to games on PC, and that includes emulation. I mean, if you're a PC gamer, you know about emulation. Everybody does. It's an open secret. And there are many resources on the OpenSea for those daring enough to use the Google search bar. Not to mention that there's no need to pay an online subscription fee to play the games that you purchased on PC. So there's that little tidbit to sweeten the deal. I love PC gaming, but I can also understand the appeal of console gaming. But it's all a series of trade-offs. While PC gaming offers much more flexibility in terms of experience, it's a much more costly endeavor both in time and currency. The majority of people that play games do it either on smartphones or via consoles, and only those who are truly locked into hardcore gaming build dedicated PCs for it. I am the minority when it comes to my choice to be a PC gamer, and I know it full well. But I've come to realize that I'm just not in the market for console gaming like I used to be. But there will always be people out there looking to pick one up for their needs. Children, busy 9-to-5 workers, and old tech-illiterate people will always exist. There will always be a console out there for people like them to pick up the early Call of Duty, Madden, or Forza, because let's be honest, that's all these people play. And that's fine. They can like what they like, and that's why these consoles exist. But I want people to be as informed as possible when it comes to making a long-term purchase like this. I'm the type of dude that wants the best from the games that I play, and I want to play everything. So I'm okay to pay the premium to get that kind of experience. But with the way the console market is going, I think we're starting to see the traditional consoles starting to fade. Console sales are starting to slow pretty dramatically as the economy is in a really rough spot. People aren't spending on consoles like they used to, which is why Microsoft is making a huge push into the streaming market. No longer is the Xbox system the primary way to play. Now you can stream games on your phone and your TV. Microsoft wants everything and everyone locked into their ecosystem, either via streaming a game from a Game Pass subscription or by making their games no longer console exclusive. Their vision of the console market isn't what Sony or even Nintendo envision it to be. Microsoft wants the Xbox brand to be as ubiquitous as Windows is for PC. They want it to be on everything, and nothing will stop their journey to be the first one to do so. Nintendo and Sony still certainly have their own niches carved out in the market, but we're going to see portable consoles be the primary driver behind console sales going forward, I think. People love portability. They love the convenience of it. That's why the Switch sold gangbusters, and why the PlayStation Portal has sold so well despite being a $200 accessory. It still requires offers a PS5, but it also allows you to play your PS5 games on the go, and there will always be a market for that. Let's also not forget the Steam Deck and how it hit as hard as it did. It combined the convenience of the Switch and allowed you to carry your Steam library with you anywhere you went. It's truly a brilliant idea. It was Valve's attempt to ease people into the PC market and creating their own user interface that minimized the friction of PC gaming. They have something on their hands, and the rest of the industry is catching on. And now there are rumors that Microsoft's next console will be portable as well. The gap between console games and phones is becoming thinner and thinner with each passing year, and I think that's something to be cautiously optimistic about. And we're even seeing companies such as Capcom port games like Resident Evil 8 to phones, which is just crazy to me that we're at this point. So with everything I've said so far, is there still a reason to buy a console? I think yes, but cautiously so. Consoles are getting worse for consumers because of their diminishing returns, but they still offer the best value to cost ratio for gaming right now, despite how their prices remain stagnant. Consoles are something that you buy every 8 years or so, and they still have longevity past that point, and I think that's amazing. Do I think that games being so large in size that you can only download 2 at a time is great? No, but there are some things you can do to mitigate that if you're looking to do so. I'm also not a huge fan of the cost associated with having to play a game online. It feels really antiquated considering how many games releasing today require an internet connection to work properly. It feels as though console manufacturers and developers keep asking for more and more with little in return, and consumers are going to hit a breaking point. They wanted a cheap gaming experience, not to be price gouged with increasing game prices and subscription prices just to play the games that they want to play. I'd say if you're fed up with that and want to experience something new and fresh and have some extra cash laying around, maybe it would be worth it to finally give PC gaming a shot. It has so many benefits that console gaming just doesn't offer, as long as you're willing to get over a few rough bumps in the learning process. Everything is possible and playable, and it's playable in 4K, 120 FPS, unlike console gaming where every game released will be a shot in the dark in terms of performance. I want everyone to be an informed consumer. Do your due diligence, do your research, think about what's best for you and let it simmer. Everything has positives and negatives, so it's best to go in with a level head. Just know that there's always a Steam sale around the corner with a cheap copy of Deus Ex with your name on it. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below. Are you a console gamer? Are you a PC elitist? The difference between the console market and PCs is a really interesting conversation that is really worth discussing. There are merits to both, but I don't really think there's a solid answer to either. It all depends, really. Huge thank you to the channel's members listed here. I wouldn't be making videos today without these fine folks. And extra special thanks go to the $3 channel members who are Cilantro and the Windigod. If you would like to support the channel like these fine folks, you can click the join button down below next to the like and subscribe buttons. October is going to be a rough month because I want to tackle both the Diablo 4 expansion and Metaphor ReFantazio. Since Metaphor is a behemoth of a game, I think Diablo 4 will come first in the video list, but I'll have something out before I tackle either of those. Be sure to keep your eyes on the subscription feed for when those drop. And as always, this has been Testing Triangles. Thanks for watching.